Similarly, here's habits and the risk to consumption. This is a graph from discount rates. I formed the surplus consumption ratio and the price dividend ratio. The model says that the price dividend ratio should be a 1-to-1 function of the surplus consumption ratio, right? That's it. How does that work out in the data? Well, they're not exactly the same. This is a simple model, but they're closer than you might have thought. As we go into the boom, price dividend ratios rise, people reach for yield. Well, consumption is rising relative to habits or whatever else is what habits really are. In the financial crisis, consumption falls like a stone. The price dividend ratio falls like a stone. Expected returns rise. At least at the general level of these graphs, it's providing a nice account of the data. This also has a very nice model, has a very nice feature. It captures the long-run equity premium. A problem of models of this sort, consumption growth multiplied by something else, is that the something else is typically stationary and goes away in the long run. In our model, gamma is about 2. In the short run, S moves 1-for-1 with consumption growth and amplifies the movement in consumption growth. That's how we get the equity premium despite gamma being 2. At longer horizons, though, there people are afraid of S separately from consumption. So the fear of a recession, the S fear, and the consumption fear become uncorrelated. And what's doing everything is the fear of the recession. That thing is moving 50 times. We know that consumption growth to the 2 isn't going to get us an equity premium. So the fear of a recession thing is what's driving the long-run equity premium. But there's a puzzle. S is stationary. Consumption's a random walk. The volatility of consumption should be increasing relative to S. And in many models, that's where it falls apart. The stationary S can't build up to big variance. In this model, it turns out, we got very lucky, S to the minus gamma is not stationary. So in fact, we replicate the long-run equity premium. I bring it up to point out that getting this long-run equity premium is a difficulty of many models. We got lucky it works out in our model, but not in many others. What's the big point? Most models are of this form. Consumption growth to something times some other factor. That's going to be the key to helping us fit the data. Something else, covariance of returns with that something else, is going to help us to explain risk premiums. But the problem is going to be with stationary X's, you're back to the consumption model at long horizons. Well, maybe that's not so bad. Maybe the data will in fact tell us that consumption growth works at long horizons and we need these new models to explain things at shorter horizons. Habits, not all is done with habits. That was the first step. All of us need to take the second steps. First of all, this model has a big failing. It only has one shock. We know in the data there's 2 shocks, at least. The dividend growth and dividend yield shocks are both there and they're both uncorrelated. In our model, consumption growth is both the cash flow and the discount rate shock. We've seen the VARs where they're both there. In the world, we need more state variables. Our model has one state variable, the surplus consumption ratio, so everything moves together. Yield spreads and dividend yields all move 1-for-1. What is that in reality? How many different dimensions of expected returns are there? I don't know, that's a good question. And then the models need to replicate the dimensions, surely more than one, surely, I hope not too many of expected returns. This model is a simulation model. It needs tests, it needs other assets. And the thing we've called habit works fine, but it could stand in for all sorts of things. In particular, leverage. We've seen in the financial crisis that as people lose money relative to the amount they've borrowed, they get more scared. Perhaps writing it in terms of leverage or a stock of durable goods, those all produce habit-like behavior. Those foundations might be more palatable than the habit. And finally, of course, it needs to be put in a serious general equilibrium with production. There's plenty to do, but at least it's an interesting new direction that captures a lot of the features we've seen in the data already.